It's the cry of generation. It's a stirring in our soul. It's dreams still in focus. It's hope still whole. For children that are and those who will be, our destiny is justice for once, for all, forever. Let it be. No more delays, denials can ignore our voices, nor suppress our choices. We come for all that God has gave, unashamed descendants of the indigenous immigrants and the once enslaved. For children that are and all those who will be, our destiny is justice for once, for all, forever. Let it be. Liberation when we read, love when we lead, moving at the speed of student needs, pushing against the abundance of oppressive greed. For children that are and all those who will be, our destiny is justice for once, for all, forever. Let it be. All right, here with my friend, brother, pastor, CEO, entrepreneur, dad, husband, all things great. I think you can even sing a little bit.
No, not like you. You'll always beat me in that category.
But Jason Janz, Jason, we're doing this justice project, and when we thought about people who we wanted to sit across in the other chair, we thought about people who were justice warriors, people who I personally have seen fight for and fight with community to get the things that we say they deserve. And you're one of those people, and you do it every day in your life, from ministry to being a great dad, great husband, a great neighbor. And so we want to just first applaud you for that and kind of let folks know who you are. You know, Jason Janz is what?
Thank you, Vernon. Good to see you.
Yeah.
I am those things you mentioned, and hopefully trying to get better at those things. But, you know, I'm a resident of Northeast Denver, and I have been for the past 16 years. I've been a Denver resident for over 40 years. Moved into Northeast Denver in 2008.
We don't hold it against you that you are a Packers fan.
Broncos are still number one.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
I moved here in 7th grade, and they went to the Super Bowl like 2 years later. I was like,
you're in love.
Yeah, the Packers were in the cellar during
good.
that time.
Just wanted to
So,
clarify.
it's still Broncos number one.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I moved to Northeast Denver. We were going to start a ministry there. We were broke as a joke. Our only option was public education, so we put our 4 boys into the neighborhood schools.
Yeah.
What a great experience for our family.
Yeah.
But I saw up close and personal all the broken pieces. I got to know them over time, and we've worked on some of those things together. And in a source of honestly deep pain, but also like the fact that was the environment in which my kids were raised and transformed, and I wouldn't change it at all.
Yeah.
But I've come to some serious like convictions and beliefs and that inform my day-to-day decisions. I now work with adult learners, 18 to 59-year-olds who live in economic poverty, and I'm trying to actually work on that end of the spectrum, where a lot of people were not given justice in a great education. And I'm like, well, I don't want you to keep having to pay for a bad system in your 40s and 50s. Let's stop generational poverty. So I'm working with moms and dads so we can stop generational poverty.
A lot of those moms and dads were former students. I've seen a lot of them come through the program that you work in. And It's like, to your point, the education system that was supposed to deliver justice gave them a diploma, and most of them in those scenarios were not ready, right? We're not ready for what was next, either academically, career-wise, and to your point, the injustice sentenced them to these continued cycles of the same systemic oppression that generations before them had experienced. And so you're seeing it on the back end to say, hey, we're still not realizing justice, because I think you just opened site number 3 or 4?
So number 3, yes.
Site number 3. So your work continues to expand, so that must mean we're still not delivering, because there's still a great need for the work that you do. And so when I ask you the question, Jason, justice is what? When it comes to education, I say justice is what?
I think it's I really work in a lens of thinking through economic justice. Basically, if you look at the historic systemic injustices and the reasons behind them, they were fundamentally economic.
Yeah.
So if you don't change the economics, then you're really not changing the game. And so I started realizing like the poverty problem at its core is a money problem, and it's not an issue of just giving people money. It's like giving them the opportunity so that they can actually work for it, but actually live and have a livable wage. And so for me, at the heart of poverty is the inability to have choice. And so like when people have money, they can make choices. So then I just followed that up and says, how do we let people put the Benjamins in their pockets that, they have the dignity of earning it themselves? And that then led me to start Cross Purpose. So at my core, I want to live in a world where every single resident in our communities, every single neighbor has equal opportunity, equal access to move forward. And to do that, because it hasn't been that way, you have to tip the scales of resources to those who've been historically oppressed. And that's the game right there. And I think we have enough wealth in this country, we have enough opportunity, we have enough educational pathways. And I say we don't have a housing crisis, we have a compassion crisis. Yeah. That's the problem.
Yeah, you say that about the housing. I always say we don't have a poverty problem, we have a greed problem. So
Yeah.
if the folks who had were as generous and compassionate,
Yeah.
I don't think we have a poverty problem. And I don't just mean with the money, but it's like you said, if we were generous with the standard of education that we should deliver kids, we would see the transformation that we want to see. Speaking of choices, right? You and I have gotten into some lines of fire because of our commitment to that. Show families having choices and families being able to navigate spaces in a way that works for their kids, right? We've done that with our kids. Like you said, we were able to put them in schools that we could then help support, they could grow in and all that. I remember one of the first things that we worked on together was the first kind of like DSST outside of their Montview campus when they wanted to come to Cole, right? Yeah. And what do you remember of that? How do you remember that happening? I still remember the drum line. We had the whole community. It was like a big affair, right? Families wanted it, right? And it was more of a, we were telling the district was in one position, but then community had said, no, this is what we want. It's been a mixed bag of what has happened at DSST Cole, but what do you remember that worked there? And you had kids that went there, and what was it like?
Yeah, I have mixed answers to all of this. Like, when we put our kids into Cole, I showed up the first day, there's about 500 people on the front lawn. I'm the only white family there. And the white families on my block, 2 blocks south, they choiced out to other schools, right? I didn't have that option. I didn't have any money. And so I was there, and I walked with the Post reporter, and I said, he was doing a story, and Michael Bennett was speaking on the steps. And I said, what are you doing here? He goes, well, haven't you heard this is the worst school in the state of Colorado? It's the only school ever closed down by the State Board of Education. I was like, well, that wasn't on the website, and I panicked, and I went to my wife, and I was like, we can't put our kids here. This is like ground zero of, what's wrong with public education. And she said, oh, let's get involved, Jason. I'll go volunteer in the classroom. You join the PTA. I walked with the principal and said, can I join the PTA? And she said, well, nobody ever asked me that, so be here on Tuesday night. That started to change my life. I think of the third or fourth meeting, this is when the charter movement was really starting to boom, and we would, unannounced in our school, it was only half full, charter schools would come in and start measuring classroom spaces with the idea that they were going to come co-locate with us. Yeah. We already knew that we're in the third turnaround, right? So like, if a really good charter school came into the third floor, perhaps our families would move up there, we'd lose less funding, we'd be starting Cole over for the fourth time. Right. So we got to fight this. So I went to my principal and I said, what are we going to do? And she said, well, let's not think about a competing charter, let's get a complementary charter. Let's put a high school on this. I said, well, how do we do that? She said, well, the best in the business right now is DSST over at Montview. And so literally drove over there, met with the CEO, and said, would you guys consider another campus here? And they had just made the decision on Campus 2, and they were queuing up Campus 3. And so, but I said to him, I said, but I don't think we want our kids going through your lottery. If they go through 5th grade at Cole, can they get a pass? Because at that time, it was actually easier to get into Harvard than DSST Montview. And so they were like, well, we've never given that exception before. And I said, well, if we're going to give you free space, which I had no authority to do as a parent, And so the board came back and said, yeah, we'll do that. We like the idea of a K-12 kind of pipeline. But, all right, so that's a beautiful thing. DSST moves in. Well, Manual High School is 4 blocks away.
Yeah.
The unintended consequence is it cannibalizes their enrollment. Well, my oldest son was at Manual High School with you.
Yeah.
So then, like, in some sense, that hurt Manual.
Yeah.
Well, Manual has been historically screwed
Yeah.
because white parents, back in the day, this is all documented,
Yeah.
didn't want to send their kids to Manual. They wanted the East became the white family school.
Yeah.
So they got the school board to enlarge the boundary, and now there's 2,200 kids at East and 300 to 400 at Manual. And I actually saw this and I read in the paper. This is during the height of like Trayvon and all that. And I went to the superintendent and I said, "We know it was a racist move to redraw the boundaries. We're now all woke. We've all figured this out. Let's redraw the boundary." And he looked right at me and he said, "If you think I'm going to take on those parents, you got another thing coming." To my face.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and then I realized, like, we if we don't have the will to undo the racist systems, then there's no hope. Manual went through, I think, 8 principals in the last 10 years. I mean, I really love the new guy in the neighborhood has really embraced him, and I think it's on the upward trajectory. But that school has suffered because of an upriver decision decades ago.
Yeah. Do you feel like when we talk about justice in the education space, do you feel like, as a parent, that there were a lot of those upstream decisions that parents were just like, what? Right? Like, they had no idea. And then how do we create a just space where parents like you and I can walk into a space and say, yeah, sure, you want the 3rd floor? Yeah, come on in, right? Do you feel like we have the ability to empower parents at that level? And do you think that's what will bring the transformation that we both fought for our kids? Can we do that now with parents today?
I never want to say that we can't engage parents powerfully now. However, most of our parents are working long hours, and to bring them up to speed on everything that's got to happen is difficult. And I remember when schools were shopping us for co-location, we knew we were in trouble, so we brought the school leadership in from the district and said, we're going to kind of like tell them, no, we're not going to allow this to happen in our school. We drew up talking points in our parent meeting, and I asked the parent person of color, I said, I nominate you to like lead the charge, and the whole room said, no, Jason, we want you to speak. I was like, no, I'm the new guy. I've only been in the neighborhood for 2 years. And like, Jason, they quit listening to us decades ago. They'll listen to you. And I was like, gladly took up the talking points to say that. But I thought, how sad that parent voice has actually been raising concerns for decades, and the district and leadership becomes tone deaf to it. So I don't know. I think that's where I'm sad in that parents do have the power to change, but the gap between what they've got to pull off in their daily life and the level of knowledge needed to tackle the beast of systemic injustice is pretty significant. So like without Faith Bridge and advocacy organizations, we're not going to get there.
And do you think, we both know this, right? We have a great block of parents in Central Park, right? And those parents in Central Park, to your point, they have lots of options for where their kids go. What does it take to stir those, usually rich white folks who live in Central Park? What do you think it stirs them to be committed to justice at every school, right? Not just the Northfields that they send their kids to, or the GWs or the East that they send their kids to. What do you think will stir them to say, you know what, I should be concerned about Manual. I should be concerned about DCIS. I should be concerned about Bruce Randolph. My kids don't go there, but their peers do. Their neighbors do, right? Is there a possibility that those people can truly wake up and fight for justice?
Yeah. Quebec is Denver's 8 Mile. And you won't see Central Park parents putting their kids on the west side of Quebec.
Yeah.
It's the impassable line, right? And I actually believe the solution is there is no significant change without a significant relationship. The only thing that's going to change the Central Park parent is a significant relationship with somebody who's been oppressed by a system, where then they develop the empathy to say, I'm not just going to care about my kid, I'm going to care about your kid.
Yeah.
And if we don't create that, I don't care how many workshops. I mean, that crowd will love to go to another workshop and hear another address and go, yes, that's wrong and it should be changed. But it will not actually move them to action unless they have a relationship.
The absence of relationship is devastating, right?
Yeah,
We got arrested together, right? I mean, you talk about relationship. I think my first real tear gas was pepper spray. Wasn't it pepper spray? I can't remember which highway we were shutting down. I-25, wasn't it? We're shutting down a highway. That's real relationship,
Yeah.
right? You lock arms. There was unrest in the streets, and we were out protesting together. I mean, people don't understand. Like you were one of the folks who was. When Ferguson stuff happened, you were on the bus with the freedom fighters. I mean, we were living it up. And I think to your point, the relationships helped us to say, okay, let's move this thing together.
I was a kid raised in rural white poverty in the Midwest. I moved out to suburban middle class Denver. And then as a 33-year-old man with 4 kids, we moved into like urban poverty in Denver. And in that space, like, when I started hearing the stories in my adult life, it created then this angst where it just propelled me to action. And that's where MLK said the riot is the language of the unheard. I got really mad, like when, in this kind of like, almost like a white rage stage, right? But I think that's not even as helpful as like really doing grassroots activism and saying, let's really work here with good people on systemic solutions that can help lots of people.
I heard you said you had brought your kids in, they went to Cole, they went to Manual. Our kids graduated together same year. And those relationships, I think to your point, were forged, and they'll always be family, right? And I sometimes say that my friends who live on the west side or east side of Quebec don't know what they're missing. Right? They don't know what they're missing on the west side of Quebec. They don't know the relationships that I think. And some people who are moving back into the neighborhood now because some folks have been priced out. Those folks who are moving in and have changed even the demographics of a school like Manual. They're not even really getting to know the east side that was.
Well, yeah, and an early African American mentor of mine said, Jason, you can't solve a problem you don't understand, and you can't understand from a distance. That proximity, there's nothing that can replace it. But then secondly, he said, Jason, why is it that when you go into the urban environment, you see a carpenter with a wooden leg and you say, there's a man with a wooden leg. But when you go across Quebec, you say, same guy, there's a carpenter. One is looking at the assets, one's looking at the deficits. And we have, for so long, looked at the west side of Quebec as a deficit-based lens. And I'm like, when you live amongst the community, you see in the Gloveville neighborhood, like a high percentage of the kids in that school, their grandkids went to that school, or the grandparents went to that school. Like, that's like generational legacy. You won't find a more resilient, resourceful, generous, spiritually strong resident of Denver than you find on the east side. Like, that is like where the crucible of suffering has produced a people that have challenged my life in so many ways that changes what I complain about. It changes how I think. It challenges my values on every level. And in some ways, I have met a group of people that are much stronger than I. And so it's not even just seeing a carpenter. It's like, oh no, there's somebody that actually I can learn from.
Yes, sir.
And that, I think that only happens in proximity because you have to see it. I see how the neighborhood forged strength in my kids. Like, my son, graduated under your leadership and with your daughter, did concurrent enrollment, went off to CU Leeds School of Business, just got his master's in leadership at your alma mater. Yeah. And he's the homeless case manager for the city of Arvada, living the life he loves. And on a tour recently, I said, Hudson, why do you work in homeless services? He goes, because we need leadership here. We need leadership. We can't always be chasing the next biggest paycheck because if we're going to solve these problems, we need leadership. Of course, I was a proud daddy. Yeah. Like when he said that, I was like, way to go. So the neighborhood saved our family.
Yeah.
We came to save it; they saved us.
Yeah. And I think to your point, I joke with Dreamer, who's the principal of Man now, and I say, don't let the press tell the wrong story. I think of Hudson, I think of Savannah, I think of Savannah Madrid, who's on our squad here. We've been pushing out greatness forever, right? And it's been overlooked. I love what you said, because some people are looking at the deficit versus the asset, right? They're looking at, and they just can't see.
25% of all U.S. presidents were fatherless kids. But we'll sit across in some Big Brother program and have an ice cream cone, and in the back of our head is all this data like chances you're going to go to prison, chances you're going to go do this, and pipeline stuff. What if we sat across from the young boy and said, I know you've got some chaos in your life, but it's forming a character in you that you could be president of the United States of America.
Right.
The data proves it.
Right.
That's where we should be looking for leadership.
Right. And we operate in this asset mind that says justice is possible. We're going to wrap up, but I want you leave us with this thought, Jason. What do you believe we need to do? We've seen charters, we've seen innovation, we've seen magnet schools, we've seen all these new iterations in education. You, again, working on the backside now of the K-12 continuum. What do we need to do to realize justice in the next 5 years?
I've been through so many policy revisions in the Innovative Schools Act and the Charter Movement and Democrats for Education Reform and social emotional learning, all this stuff. And I think all of the attention is great. It all breaks down without strong leadership at all levels, but primarily at the top. And until we get tenured, convicted leaders of schools and systems that care fundamentally, are we delivering on the mission for kids to have a great education? I don't think any policy is going to actually grab. And so it's not the silver bullet, because everyone wants a silver bullet, but I do believe 75% of the game is just getting the right, great leaders. And so whatever we can do to incentivize the system so that we attract and retain and grow the best leaders possible. And they are amongst us. Yeah. They are amongst us. But that's where I would put my energy, because there's 25 things you can do, but that's where I would focus.
Last question, Bo Nix, is he going to be able to take us to the Super Bowl?
Bo Nix is able to take us to the Super Bowl.
Okay, there we go. We heard it here. Jason Janz. Bo Nix we are believers, so he'll be taking us to the Super Bowl. We don't know when.
Hey, I will this. I mean, I've watched the Broncos. The last 10 years, it's hard to get excited because you just watch the game and go, this is not good football.
Right.
And I just remember the Elway days. When the ball got into his hands, you had hope.
Yeah.
And with Bo, it's like we saw some things this year and we were like, well, that's how I used to feel.
Right.
And so you want to hope,
yeah.
but it's like,
so.
It's
kind of like how it's the same way we feel about this work that we do. It's like every time we see this positive stuff, you're like, oh, I want this to be, and
yeah.
So I appreciate you, man. I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you for giving your life to this work and for being a good husband, good dad, good neighbor, good leader, and somebody who's committed to justice.
Yeah, back at you, man.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Justice Cast. If you are moved and inspired by what you heard this week, we need you to do justice by doing 3 things. Number 1, like and share this episode with your friends and family and network. Number 2, sign and share the Do Justice Pledge. And 3, join us for an upcoming Do Justice action. You can find those listed on our website at www.faithbridgeco.org. That's www.faithbridgeco.org. Remember, the world we believe for is possible. Do justice.
Thank you to Jason Janz for being our guest this week. Thank you to our funders and sponsors. Join us next week when Vernon sits down with the CEO of Lyra, Colorado, Mary Sewell.